Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Good morning. I'm a drunk. My name's Jason Sibley. My name is not Jason. My name is not Jason S. My name is Jason Sibley. My sponsor's name is Joe Reed. The sponsor before him was Russell Gillespie. Wow. Very first time I was ever asked to do this deal, to speak at a meeting, I had been going to 3 meetings a day, 7 days a week, except for Wednesday when they had a candlelight meeting. You could go to 4. I'd been going for a year, never missed a turn, and they asked me to do this, and they gave me about 30 days notice. I would suggest that you not do that for a newcomer. But I practiced, you know. I knew exactly what I was going to say, when I was going to say it, how I was going to say it, body language, voice inflection, the whole 9 yards, you know. I had it honed down, 60 minutes. The night came for me to speak, and just before the meeting, I'm a heavy smoker, and I went outside to smoke a cigarette, and there was this old dude out there, and I didn't really want his opinion or his advice, but I didn't want him to know that I didn't want his opinion or his advice. So I asked him, I said, Mr. Billy, do you have any advice? And he said, Jason, I'm incapable of going 24 hours and not telling a lie. I suspect you're a little like that too. So why don't you try to tell the truth? Mr. Billy completely ruined my story that night. Because I was going to try to be more sober than I really was, and I was going to be more drunk than I really was. I was going to exaggerate. Y'all call it a lie. I'm going to try to do now what I did that night, and that is just be as honest as I know how to be, as honest as I remember it. I'll try to get through a drunk log fairly quick as I can. I was born the 7th of 8 children. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, home of the LSU Fighting Tigers. I grew up in, I guess, federally subsidized government housing kind of living, you know. My mother was a single parent. My parents divorced when I was about a year old, and I just grew up as a street kid, a punk, you know, just a little, you know, when you go through the bad sections of town and you got all those little punk kids hanging out on the corner and you're nervous and you lock your door. I was one of them little punk kids, you know, and nothing special. It was just a street kid, a punk, you know, and I hung out with other punks, you know. That's what we did. We hung out. And when I grew up, my mother, like I said, she was a single parent trying to raise 8 children, and she tended bar and she waitressed, and she just did what she had to do to keep them kids clothed and fed. And I don't remember there being a whole lot of rules when I was a kid. She wasn't there a lot because she had to work, you know. And I do kind of remember 2 unspoken, unwritten rules. One was, if you come home after having been out and it's daylight outside, that meant you've been out all night and you're going to get a beating. So you better get home before the sun comes up. And the other rule I kind of remember is you don't go in mama's purse. You know, to this day, if I ask my wife, baby, where's the fingernail clippers? She'll say they're in the purse. I'll bring her the whole damn purse. I ain't going in there, you know. And when I was about 9 or 10, somewhere in there, I broke rule number 2 and I went in mama's purse. And it was a big purse. I mean, she carried like a half a house, you know. And Guys, I'm going to tell you, if y'all ain't never been in a woman's purse, there's some cool stuff in there, you know? I ain't kidding you. And it was heavy, man. She was a bartender, and there was a bunch of change and stuff, money and stuff in there. And I got some of that money, and I went across the street to a much older fella's house. We all had street names. I was Tiger. He was Papa, you know. And I went over to Papa's house, and he was like, 11, 12. And we went down to the Stop and Go or 7-Eleven, I don't remember which it was. Went down to a store, and we got some old dude to buy us a bottle of Bacardi 151 rum. And I used to say that we went to Papa's house and we drank it. I don't know if we did or not. We went to Papa's house and we started drinking it. I don't remember much after starting. I know that I spent a couple of days at Papa's house, and there was things coming out of all ends of me. And I'm going to tell you, from that day to this day, I never drank rum again. But I am here to report that alcohol comes in other forms, okay? And I experimented with most of them, I believe. And the only reason I tell that little story is, as I remember it, that's really kind of my first experience that I remember with alcohol. I'm sure I had a sip of beer or some crap. I don't know. We used to steal beer from the store and party and stuff, but that's what I remember as being my first drunk. Nothing really special to say about growing up. I just was a street kid, and I did all the crazy crap that street kids and punks do. And I quit school when I was 16 and joined the Navy. On my 17th birthday, I was at AFES in New Orleans. A couple days later, I was in boot camp, and I loved it. Absolutely loved boot camp. The regiment and the discipline and the organization of it. And I never had that, and I excelled. I did great. Man, I'm a great starter, I did really, really good. And they patted me on my pointy little head, and they said, son, just wait till you get to the real Navy. And I said, man, I can't wait. This is great. And I went through boot camp, and I did good, and they said, okay, you're going to the real now. I said, cool, and they sent me to Millington, Tennessee for a year. I'm thinking France, Spain, Germany, Greenland, Iceland, exotic places, exotic women, Millington, Tennessee. I excelled. They told me I didn't have to stay there long, and I did good because I'm a real good starter, and I was there. And about a year later, they said, okay, just wait till you get to the real Navy. And I'm like, cool, Greenland, Spain, France, Germany, Iceland, I don't care, exotic places and women. This is great. They sent me to Beeville, Texas. And I shortly developed what they would later classify as an attitude problem. And, they used to give me pats on my pointed little head, and they give me extra little stripes and tell me how I was doing great, and they quit doing all that. And I used to tell you a really wonderful story about how I connived, because I'm borderline genius. I connived my way out of the Navy early with an honorable discharge. I used to tell you that story. And I told it good, and I believed it. And I do have an honorable discharge. I got it framed, hanging on my wall, And if you hadn't ever been in the military, you might think that's wonderful. But if you've been in the military, that honorable discharge that they give you is not really your discharge. Your discharge is a little paper called a DD-214. I found mine a few years ago. And it's the actual discharge, and at the bottom, it says narrative reason for discharge, and mine says alcohol abuse, rehabilitation failure. And then there's a re-enlistment code, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Mine's a 4. That means they don't want you back. Need not apply. But they kicked me out of the Navy after 2.5 years, and now I was 19, and I was a veteran. I've served my country. I'm important. And I went on back to Baton Rouge, and I needed a job, something important for a veteran, And I thought about it a little bit, and I said, I figured out what I needed to do. I needed to be a cop, get a gun and a badge, and be able to tell people what to do and how to do it. I'm happy to report I never became a cop. But I did, for a very brief period of time, go to work for the Louisiana Department of Corrections as a correctional officer. And that didn't last very long. I quickly realized that, you know, a lot of these boys are in here doing what I was doing, but they got caught. And, you know, that day that I took that badge off and I was hollering and screaming and cussing and fussing, and I threw that badge at the warden and I told him what he could do with it. And I had a buddy of mine tell me, he said, Jason, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, but I damn sure ain't going to be no prison guard. He said, Jason, you ought to go sell cars. You make $1 million selling cars. $1 million? Son, I was living in a grocery store, a little apartment above a grocery store down on the river, and was driving a 1972 Ford Courier pickup truck, 4-cylinder, 4-speed with no air and a busted door. You know, you had to hold the door shut when you drove, you know. It wasn't bad till you had to shift. You know, you had to be quick. $1 million. I said, how do I do that? And he said, go down here and tell them you know me. And I said, okay. So I went down there and I told them, and they said, we don't know him. But I had it on my mind, man, so I went to several places, and then I did go to this one place where this fellow hired me and told me what to do and how to do it, and I did good. I excelled, because I'm a real good starter, you know. And I did exactly what they told me to do, and how they told me to do it, and when they told me to do it, and life was good, and God was in heaven, and all is right with the world, and the moon and the stars were aligned, and I was making a running ton of money, and things was just right. And they gave me a new little truck to drive, you know, new, without no busted door, that had air. And it had like a license plate on it that went to that vehicle, you know. And they told me I could drive it for free, you know. And life was good, man. And you know the story, man. I'm driving the truck. Me and my buddy went out we was going to have a beer or two, and you know, and the lights come on, and the guy tells you to stand on one foot, and you know, all that deal, you know. And later that night when I was in the drunk tank, and I was telling them drunks, because I really wasn't drunk, and I was telling them how my high-powered attorney, I didn't know no attorneys. I know a lot of them now, but at the time I didn't know. But I was telling them how they was going to come get me out that evening, because I wasn't supposed to be there. Well, anyway, the next day, when I was still there, I had one of my sisters, I have 5 of them, I had one of my sisters come down and get me out, and I knew I was fired. I knew I done lost the best gig I ever had, you know, because I've seen guys get fired for a whole lot less than this. And I got to the job there about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and got in the manager's office, and man, he got to hollering and screaming, and I knew he would. And what he told me, he said, Jason, he said, if that ever happens to you again, you call me. You don't call anybody else. Do you understand? And I said, yes, sir. I didn't understand, but I didn't want him to know that I didn't understand. He said, now go to work. And I learned an extremely valuable lesson, and that is if you can sell enough cars, you can do anything you want to do and get away with it, you know. This is great, man. A year later, I was a finance guy, and a year later, I was a sales manager, and a couple years later, I was a general manager, and I'm running several dealerships, and God's in heaven, and all is right with the world, and I'm making a running ton of money. And somewhere along the line, I took a hostage. Y'all call it getting married. But, you know, a hostage can't do nothing. A hostage has got rules that they have to, chores that they have to do, and things that they have to do, and they do what you tell them to do when you tell them to do it. You know, they don't have any say-so. I didn't have a wife. I had a hostage. And I'm tripping along, and life is good. And somewhere along the line, this little blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby showed up. And I'm fond of saying that that's the absolute only thing I knew about love when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's how I felt about that little girl, you know. I loved her. I didn't care if she was crying or laughing or nothing, man. She could be doing no strings attached, unconditionally. That was my baby, and I loved her. She could do no wrong, you know. And somewhere around, I guess it was year 7 of this captivity, hostage number 1, as I like to refer to her as, decided that she wanted to try to escape. Well, you know, and seriously, it was okay with me. I was okay with that. And my girlfriends, both of them, really liked the idea. But the problem is, that she wanted to take that little blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby with her. That was a problem for me. I had little or no control over it, but it was a problem for me. Well, bottom line, she did. She escaped, and bottom line, she did. She took her with her. And I don't pay bills, okay? No, this ain't no nice step. I don't pay bills. I just never have. I make money, I put it in the account. That's a hostage's job, you know, much like laundry and food and things like that. You pay bills. Well, when she escaped, I told her on her way out of the prison, I said, listen, leave me all the bills so I can pay them. And she did. And I sat down to pay these bills, and as I remembered, it was like $270,000 I was in debt. Most of it was past due. There was no savings account. There was no IRAs or any of that kind of thing. All that stuff had been closed for months. This was not a snap decision on her part. Girlfriend planned her escape, okay? I sat down to pay these bills, and I couldn't. There was like $20-something in the checking account, you know? So I did the most reasonable thing I could think of to do at the time. I quit my job, and I ran, because that's what I do, man. When the going gets tough, I run, you know? And I ran from here to there to over yonder to, it don't make a darn, I just ran. And if you do what I did in those days, guys would pay you large sums of money to commit to come to work for them. You know, they'd give you a signing bonus, you know? And I never would take that money, but all of a sudden I'd start taking that money. And I'd get a fellow to write me a check, and I'd tell him I'd be there tomorrow, and I'd move, you know? And I did that a good bit. Because that's back when I still had a little bit of a reputation. And I developed a different reputation shortly after that. I ran all over the place, and I ran even to Mississippi. I make fun of people that live in Mississippi, okay? But somehow I wound up in Mississippi. And I took a job running this guy's car lot, and somehow I ran across this girl, and we went out. And I used to say we went out and got drunk. I don't know if we went out and got drunk or not. I know we went out, and some of us I got drunk, you know. And then we went out again, and me, got drunk again. And we did it several times, and it was cool. One thing I really liked about hostage number 2, as she would become, is that she had this little brown-haired, blue-eyed girl. And she liked me, and I liked her. And she was cool, you know. And I remember early in this conversation, we had a discussion about what she would call me. And I explained to her she couldn't call me Jason. So I became Mr. Jason. And it didn't take me very long, just a matter of a few short months, where I convinced hostage number 2 to sell her house and her property and her vehicle and give up everything she had and quit a job she'd been on for 10 years and move 100 miles north into a barn with me. Literally, a barn. First time I ever saw it, there was chickens in it. Didn't have no floors, walls, nothing, just an unfinished barn. And it ain't like I made, you know, renovations to this place. When I left it, it was still a barn. And we lived there. And then we went over here, and then we went over there, and we just ran. And of all places, we even wound up back in Baton Rouge, which is strange because alcohol is really not my problem. My problem is really Baton Rouge. And well, Louisiana in general, you know, and the people in it. Because y'all don't respect me, and y'all don't recognize how smart I am, and y'all won't act right, and y'all won't do right. And I had to get out of the whole state. And next thing you know, I was back here. And about a year or so into this deal, hostage number 2 started planning her escape. I married some pretty smart women. Anyway, she was going to escape back to Mississippi, back to her people, you know, be close to her mom and stuff. And I didn't have any other plans, so I went with her. And wound up back in Mississippi, you know. And I was unemployable. You know, the bottom line is I couldn't get a job anywhere. And there was a guy that used to work for me, and I call myself doing him a favor. I'm going to go to work for him sell some cars for him. I'm not really a car salesman, I'm management. But I'm going to do him a favor, always thinking of others, that's me. And I'm going to sell cars for this guy. And I'm selling cars, and, you know, I changed up my pattern of drinking between hostages, you know, because I'm a barroom drunk, man. I work hard, I work long. And when I get off at 8, 9 o'clock at night, I go to the barroom. I mean, that ain't alcoholic. That's just what you're supposed to do. That's where the guys are going, you know. And you go to the barroom and you drink. And the barrooms close at 2, and you can reasonably expect me home about 3 or 4, you know. That's reasonable. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's what I do. And I go home and I get a little bit of sleep, and Susie said it this morning, 12 minutes. I can get up, drink a cup of coffee, shave, get in the shower, get dressed, and go to work. 12 minutes it takes me, you know. And that's what I do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that cost me hostage number 1. So when I got hostage number 2, I changed up and I quit going to the bar rooms. I did all my drinking at the house, okay? Most of my drinking I did at the house. And I'm selling cars for this buddy of mine, doing him a favor, and I got a mother, and she called me, and she said, Jason, you got a sister? And I said, yes, ma'am, I got 5 of them. And she says, well, one's got cancer. And I said, yes, ma'am, I heard. And she said, she's having surgery. And I said, yes, ma'am, I heard. And she said, are you going? And I said, no. I'm not a doctor. I mean, what can I do for her, you know? My being there is not going to help her. Why would I go? No thought of love or support or any of that kind of crap. It's an interruption of my time. It's an inconvenience for me. And not only that, but it's in Louisiana, you know, the source of my problems, you know. Well, if your mama's anything like my mama, you know, mamas are like the queens of guilt trips. And she put this guilt trip thing on me, and somehow she got me committed to going. And so I committed to going, and it was on a Tuesday, which is okay with me because I didn't have no plans, you know. But I did have plans the Sunday before because, see, I'm a football fan, and the Sunday before was Super Bowl Sunday. And one of my favorite teams is playing with my favorite player in the Super Bowl, and one of those casinos down there got a deal. Now, this is a deal if you're drunk like me. For $100, you and a guest can go to this casino, and they'll feed you if you eat. I don't eat, but, you know, if you want to eat, they'll feed you. And then you'll sit at this table, and they'll bring you top shelf whiskey all day long and set you in front of these big screen TVs, and they'll let you watch the Super Bowl being served by a tuxedo-wearing waiter and top shelf whiskey. That's a deal. I didn't have 100, but I found it. And me and old hostage number 2 went. And newsflash, man, I got drunk. You know, there ain't no newsflash, man. I get drunk. That's what I do. You know, I drink every day. I hear of social drinkers and weekend alcoholics and binge drink. I'm sure there are those types, but I'm not. I get drunk every day. I get drunk. No big deal. Right? I didn't get no drunker than I'd gotten the day before or the week before or the year before. I drink 363, 364 days a year. Looking back on it, I never thought about it at the time, but looking back on it, it seems like there was always 1 or 2 days every year that I didn't get drunk for no particular reason. Just looking back on it, there was always a day or 2 in a year that I didn't get drunk. Well, the next day was a Monday, and the next day, that Monday, was one of those days. I got up. I went to work. I got off work. I did not stop by the beer store to pick up a couple of beers because, you know, it's a 2-beer ride. You don't measure it in time or miles. It takes 2 beers to get home. And then when I got home, I didn't drink beer till hostage number 2 went to sleep, you know. And then when she went to sleep, I didn't go get me a vodka tonic in a big hurricane glass and mix it up and drink it, and then drink a beer, and then drink a vodka tonic out of the bottle that she don't know I got, and then drink a beer and just swap it up like that so you can cut down on beer bottles. If you do that, you will cut down on beer bottles. There'll be less beer bottles in the morning. But I didn't do any of that, man. I came home and I went to sleep. And I got up the next day and it was Tuesday. Sister, cancer, guilt trip, mother. Oh my God, Baton Rouge. Oh, Jesus Christ, I got to go to Baton Rouge. So I did. I went to Baton Rouge. And I'm here to tell you, it was one of the worst days of my life. I get to Baton Rouge. I get to Woman's Hospital in Baton Rouge, and there was some family members there. And I remember thinking the only thing that I want in life is for the doctor to come out and say, we're finished with the surgery, she's not dead, and Jason, you can leave. That's all I wanted, man. But it took all day long, sitting in a waiting room with people, you know, and her husband, Ray, you know, some of Ray's buddies are back there. You know, I used to party with Ray. I used to party with Kim. And they was in this AA thing and had been for like 4 or 5 years. And they didn't party no more. And we didn't have a whole lot in common. You know what I'm saying? Ray was there. And Ray was nervous. Man, his wife was having surgery and he was upset. And Ray wanted to visit. I don't know how to visit. You know, I don't want to visit. I know how to be your boss or your employee. I know how to be totally in charge or totally subservient. But to be equal, just to be one amongst, I don't know how to do that, man. I don't possess those social skills to just sit around and visit, you know. But that's what they wanted to do, and it aggravated the hell out of me. I wanted to go, you know. This is Tuesday, man. I ain't had a toddy since Sunday. You know, this is not good. Later that evening, man, the doctor came out and says, Kim ain't dead. We're finished. Jason, you can leave. And I said, hallelujah, praise the Lord. You know, and I ain't even religious. It's been a couple of days I ain't had a toddy. You know where I'm going. But see, I'm borderline genius. Did I tell you that? I think on many levels. Okay? And I'm real bright. Not as bright as Don Caldwell, but I'm bright. And I knew something about my drinking before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew I could not drink. Because, see, I had just gone 2 days and not drank. But I also knew full well, consciously knew, that once I start drinking, I have little or no control of what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it, when I'm going to do it. I also know that alcohol is not my problem. Louisiana is my problem. And I'm in Louisiana. So I can be in Mississippi in probably 2 hours. And if I stop in Louisiana on my way out of Baton Rouge and I get me a cold beer for the ride, I may not get back out of Louisiana. I knew that. So I made a conscious decision to not stop and drink. And I got in that van, and I headed my little skinny butt to Mississippi. And I was in this van, and I was in the worst possible company. I was alone, okay? And I was doing something that I'm not real good at. I was thinking. And I'm riding alone in this van down the interstate, ain't had a toddy in 2 days, and I'm thinking. And I want to tell you right here about my conception of God at this point in my life. My conception of God at this point in my life is, when I first read Bill's story and he talked about his conception of God, I knew exactly what he was talking about. I'm not religious. I never grew up in any kind of organized religion, never subjected to that kind of stuff. I know something about it because I watch TV, but you know, some of y'all stand up, some of you sit down, and some of you talk back, and some of you don't. Some of you drink, some of you dance, some of you do all. There's too damn many rules. I don't know what they are, and I'm too lazy to figure them out. Okay? So I don't know much or nothing about God. I wouldn't argue that he exists. I just don't know anything about him. I read a story one time several years ago in the back of the book. I don't even know if it's in the 4th edition anymore, but it's a story about where a guy talks about having a need for God. I never saw a need for God in my life. I had a need, but I didn't see it. And I just, there was no reason for me to investigate it any further, you know. I'm in this van, I'm alone, I'm going down the road, I ain't had a toddy in 2 days. I realized I was alone, I didn't need to be embarrassed, and I said it out loud because nobody could hear me. And I said, hey man, if you up there, what am I supposed to do about all these problems? See, I got problems, you know. All my problems had names. You know, they were Larry and Leslie and Leroy and Bubba and Fred and Lulabelle and all these problems I got, employers and ex-employers. And when I said that out loud, hey man, if you up there, what am I supposed to do about all these problems? I got thick. I didn't get heavy, I didn't get fat, I got thick. I just felt thick, man. I felt, to give you a visual, I felt like the Michelin Man. I just felt big and thick and spongy, you know. And I had both hands on the steering wheel. I remember looking down at my fingers thinking, man, they seem like they're this big around, but they're not. They're normal size, but I feel weird, thick feeling. Man, what's going on with me? I know I'm probably having a heart attack. I'm going to have to go to the doctor. I'm going to have to help the doctor diagnose me. He's going to ask me when this happened, so I better look at the clock. So I did. I looked at the clock. And from the time I looked at the clock, 7 minutes passed. No significance, I don't think, to the 7 minutes. And that feeling went away. That feeling of thickness went away. And it was replaced with the inability to think, which is different for me because I usually think about 4 or 5 things at a time, you know. Borderline genius. Yeah. I used to think I was real smart. Y'all just told me I was confused. Anyway, I couldn't think, man. I remember I'm riding down the road and I'm hitting my head like, man, come on, think. I had one thought stuck in my head that I couldn't think about anything else. And that thought was go to an AA meeting. I don't want to go to an AA meeting. You know, y'all, man, I know a couple of y'all. Hell, I'm related to Kim. Don't tell her I said that. Anyway, y'all have problems. Y'all go to AA and y'all do whatever it is y'all do. That ain't me. See, my problem is Louisiana. See, my problem's really TV. TV's my real problem, you know. You know, when you're sitting there and you're watching TV and you got you a cold vodka tonic and you just got a fresh one, and as your television program ends, you can't not drink the vodka tonic, so you drink the vodka tonic, and then another television program comes on, and you get interested in that, so you got to go get a beer. And if I could ever get a vodka tonic or a cold Budweiser to end at the same time a television program ended, I could go to sleep. You know, I could probably do it now with DVRs, but then we didn't have one, you know. TV, Louisiana, the people, that's my problem. But I got this thought stuck in my head. Go to an AA meeting and I can't get it out, and that thought lasted for 34 miles. And the reason I know it lasted for 34 miles is because it happened right about the Louisiana-Mississippi state line. And I couldn't think about anything else until mile marker 34. And then my head cleared up, and I could think. And I was about 10 or 15 minutes from the house, and I had 10 or 15 minutes to come up with a good lie, which is a lot of time. I can lie on the fly, okay? But I had like 10 or 15 minutes to come up with a good lie when I got home so I could tell hostage number 2 why I had been gone all day long and now I have to leave and go to an AA meeting. And I couldn't come up with a good lie. So I got home and I asked her to come in the bedroom and I told her what I just told y'all. And I just told her just straight out what happened. And she said, hold that thought. And she got up, she went in the other room, she came back with a 6-page letter. I live in the same house as this woman. She's writing me a letter, okay? It's 6 pages, man, 3 pages, front and back, 6-page letter about how the disease of alcoholism is killing me, has destroyed our sex life. And I read this letter, man, And I'm like, when did you write this? And she said, a long time ago. And I said, well, why are you just now giving it to me? She says, because maybe based on what you told me, you won't holler and scream and cuss and punch holes in the wall and go crazy. And I said, I need to call AA. And she says, here's the number. As soon as she said, here's the number, I'm going to tell you how my mind works, man. See, because I'm pretty sharp. I can get this deal figured out. I'll call this AA deal, and I'll get the little AA secretary, and I'll smooze her, and then I'll go this AA deal for about a week or two. It don't take me long. I'm real smart. I know some of y'all got to go for years, but I can get this deal figured out in like a week or two. And I'll go for a week or two, and things will get better, and people treat me right. And this, hell, I'm pretty excited. Give me the phone, man. I'm fired up, man. I called. And I'm waiting for the little AA secretary to answer, and I hear, hello? And I'm like, I think I got the wrong number. Who'd you call? When he said, who'd you call? I realized my anonymity. This guy don't know me. I said, well, I called AA. Well, you got who you called. I said, yeah, dude, look, I'm supposed to go to y'all's meeting. They already started. It was 8 o'clock at night. I said, well, can't I go late? If you want to. Well, yeah, man. I want to. Where you want to go? I said, where's it at? They all over the place. I said, how about Gulfport, man? I don't know nobody in Gulfport. Yeah, you know where the firehouse is? I said, no, man, hold on. So I gave the phone to hostage number 2, and I said, here, this jerk's rude, man. Talk to him. Get directions for me. I'm going to report this guy to the AA police. He ain't asked my name, social security number, Visa card, nothing. I'm pissed. So I get in the vehicle and I go to the firehouse. I go to 24th Avenue, the Gulfport, the Gulf Coast group of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I get there late. And it was weird, man. They had these folding tables, and they was all set up, and there was people sitting around them. And I didn't want to be noticed. So I went and sat on a stool, the only stool in the room, in the corner by the ladies' bathroom, the literature rack. And I sat on this corner because I didn't want to be noticed. The only thing I was missing was the little pointed hat, And it was weird, man. They talked about some stuff, and it's unimportant what they talked about. I don't know what they talked about. They was talking stuff, and I don't know. It doesn't matter. And when it was over with, they did the damnedest thing. They all got up and they held hands. And I'm fond of saying I was not in the habit of holding hands with men when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. But I'm a chameleon, I'm a conformist. I'm going to fit right in, and I go get in, and there's a guy on either side of me, and they say the Lord's Prayer. Well, I don't know the Lord's Prayer. But I don't want them to know that I don't know the Lord's Prayer. So they, Our Father, and I'm, hello, Father, humming cool, far out, okie dokie, whatever, hum, hum. If you just hum, they think hum. And they do that deal, and then they do the weirdest thing, man. They go, keep coming back, you wait if you like it. Damnedest thing, man. It'd be all right, I guess, if they just do it, but they shake it different. It's goofy, I learned a long time ago, amen means I'm done, And I'm going to tell you, if I'm in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous with you and we hold hands and we say the Lord's Prayer and amen comes and I drop your hand, please don't be offended. I don't do all the homina, okay? And I know the Lord's Prayer now. I know all of them, the words. I don't even have to hum it. When they were done with the keep coming back and that deal, it's cool. If y'all want to do it, that's on y'all. But I ain't getting in the middle of all that. I'm done. Amen. When they got done, everybody dropped hands, except this big old boy holding my left hand. And he was a big boy. He's like 350, And I told you I was pretty sharp, man. I looked around the room, and I quickly realized he and I were the only two holding hands. And I don't know much about this AA thing. If y'all want me to hold hands with some big old boy, or hell, I reckon I will. But I felt kind of weird. And this guy looked at me, he says, you know, Jason, if you keep coming back, that shaking will go away. And it kind of pissed me off, and it kind of embarrassed me, you know. But I also thought about it, because every once in a while in the summer, man, I used to get to see that little blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl, you know. And in summer in South Mississippi's hot. And she'd ask me, Daddy, why are you shaking? And I'd say, Daddy got a chill, you know. She didn't believe that crap when she was 3 or 4, you know. And daddies ain't supposed to lie, you know. Daddies are supposed to have the answers. They're supposed to know. They're supposed to be honest. They're supposed to love. I don't want to shake no more. I said, okay, when y'all come back? And they said, tomorrow at noon. I said, okay. I heard something else really important that night. I heard, Jason, you're the most important person here. And I said, I know. I mean, it's nice for me to be associated with people that realize how damn important I am, you know. And I don't know how y'all did this deal without me. You know, and they said, well, keep coming back. And I said, okie dokie, cool, when y'all come back? And they said, tomorrow at noon. I said, okay, I'll be here. And I was. And they said, and it didn't take me long. I'm a real quick study to figure this AA thing out. There ain't nothing to this AA deal. You know, they get together, there's a guy at the end, he goes through like a little ritualistic reading kind of thing, and then they go around the room, and this guy talks about how grateful he is. And then this girl says, oh, I'm so grateful. And this one even messes up, says something about I'm happy to be an alcoholic. And this one says, I pass. They knew. And, you know, and I'm grateful. And they talk about all the drunk stuff they did and the crazy crap they did and how grateful they are. And then they say, hi, Father, hamana, hamana, hamana. And they say, Jason, you're the most important. And I'm like, I know. And come on back and let's do it. And it don't take long for me to figure. There ain't nothing to this AA thing, you know. And I went every day. Now, that was a Tuesday. I went Wednesday 4 times, Thursday 3 times, Friday 3 times, Saturday same thing. Sunday night they tricked me. A bunch of old dudes there. You know, and they was all going around, and women too, and they were going around the room and they were talking about this one particular fella and how he was celebrating 20 years abstinence from alcohol. Bullshit. You know, I don't care. If he wants to say he ain't had a drink 20 years, it don't matter to me. But I immediately don't like him. See, because they all talking about how wonderful he is and they ain't said nothing good about me. You know? And they going around the room, and there was this one little lady. I hadn't seen her before, a little gray-headed lady, and she said she didn't say this, but what I heard her say, we've had a couple conversations since. What I heard her say was, when it was her turn to share, was, Jason, you're new here. You don't know anything at all about getting and staying sober, so you really ought to shut up and listen. She hurt my feelings. When it got around to me, I said, I'm Jason, I'm an alcoholic, and that's more than that lady said I was supposed to say, so I pass. By that time, the chairman usually had to shut me up, you know. I'd heard y'all talking about these sponsors and that you needed a sponsor. I'm not a total conformist. You know, they say men sponsor men and women sponsor women. You know, I'm going to get a sponsor, but by God, I'm going to skirt the issue. So I went up to that little old lady after the meeting. I said, do women sponsor men? And she said, well, when they're young enough to be one of my kids, I guess it'll be all right till you find a man you're more comfortable with. Are you a pure alcoholic? And I said, what? She said, are you a pure alcoholic? Lady, there ain't nothing pure about me. What are you talking about? She said, are you a dope head? I said, lady, I've smoked enough dope to fill up this room, but that ain't my problem. My problem is I'm here because I'm a drunk. She said, you got a big book? And I said, oh, yeah. I heard y'all talking about that. I got one. I ain't read it, but I got it. She said, well, you got a 12 and 12? And I said, what's that? She said, find out and get one. She said, you got a dictionary? I said, yeah. She said, good. Here's my number. Call me tomorrow. This lady's like an A-Nazi bitch. You know? This ain't working out good at all, you know? And for the next year, she walked me through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous as outlined in the textbook, using the 12 and 12 as a guide and a dictionary to understand, because I don't understand basic English. And I look up, and I'm a year abstinent from alcohol. And life's pretty darn good. And I'd run across this old dude, and he came to my house one night, and he was way too old to be driving. You know how them old dudes are. I mean, this old dude was old. He was in his 70s, you know. Ain't got no damn business driving, you know. And he came to my house one night, And he had this book. It was a red book. And I knew what it was because I had studied the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. And his big book was red, and I was freaking out. And I was reading it and checking it, and I was taking pictures of it. And he and I visited, and he was excited about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he was excited about the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he had gotten sober 3 months after I was born. He said if he'd have known I was born, he'd have quit drinking quicker. But anyway, he'd been sober forever, you know? And he'd been married to the same woman for like 63 years. Find somebody who is like you want to be and do what he did, and you'll get what he got. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting up with this old dude, and we're talking about the program. I'm like, Russell, I need a sponsor. He said, we'll talk. Me and Russell talked for several years, and he became my friend, you know, and I love him. Anyway, Macho Man, that's me, Mr. Macho. There was a hurricane came, y'all heard about it, Katrina, and it wiped out Russell's house, and Russell, his wife had passed away, Ruby had passed away a couple years before, and Russell went up to visit a newcomer that he sponsored, some old dude, been sober 30 some odd years, he called him a newcomer. And Joe up in Itabena, Mississippi, and a few months after the storm, I guess, and Joe called me one morning and he said, Jason, I went to wake up our old friend this morning, he wouldn't wake up. I said, what do you mean? He said, Russell's dead. And I cried, you know, I can say that, I cried, and I boo-hooed and poor me and all that crap. And then I got to laughing. And I was like, you know, Russell can go dance with Ruby. He ain't got to fool with me no more. You know, this ain't no bad deal. In about 30 minutes, I picked up the phone and I called this old dude that I had met a few years before. He'd been married to the same woman now 52 years, but at the time less than 50, but coming up on it. And been sober since Moby Dick was a minnow, you know. And he's excited about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's excited about the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. He's happy, and he don't drink. Some old dude named Joe Reed up in Simsboro, Mississippi, or Louisiana, you know. And I called Joe, and I said, hey, man, how's your health? He said, I'm in pretty good shape. Why? I said, because Russell's dead. That means you're it, pal. So that's how Joe became my sponsor. And I really only picked him because Glenda, because I love her so much. Anyway, I got to tell you, I should be running out of time, hopefully, yeah. I got to tell you a couple things. The little blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl, she's the mother of my only grandson, a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed fella. And he's a neat kid, and she's a neat kid. And I see them as often as I can, and they love me, and I love them. The little brown-haired, blue-eyed girl, I'm going to tell you about her. Wasn't long into this deal when Lacey was, I always forget, but she was like 10, 11, 12 years old, I don't know, and we were playing basketball. She was playing basketball. I'm a heavy smoker. She was playing basketball out in the driveway and shooting hoops, and she tells me, she says, Dad, I've been thinking. And I said, what? And she said, I've been thinking that maybe it'd be kind of cool if maybe you adopted me. Yeah, kiddo, we can do that if you want to do that. And she said, yeah, I'd like to do that. I said, okay. And she said, I was also thinking, you think it'd be okay if I changed my last name? Yeah, kiddo, if that's what you want to do, that's what we'll do. And she's mine, and she couldn't be more mine. and I couldn't be more hers. You know, she loves her daddy, and I love my daughter. She's a grown woman doing quite well and informs me on a regular basis. She makes more money than I do. She's a together young lady. The only other thing I'm going to tell you about is I'm going to tell you about how my conception of God has changed. You know, we come into Alcoholics Anonymous and we talk about, you know, get this conception of a power, your own conception. But I rarely hear speakers talk about their conception, and I like to share mine because I've sat in many meetings before I had any conception, and I sure could have used the help. And if it don't help but one person, that's all I really care about anyway. And the way I'd like to tell you about my conception of God is by telling you a little story. And in this little story, oh, by the way, because I'm going to get in trouble later if I don't tell this, hostage number 2, I set her free. I let her go, and she didn't leave. You know, a lot of times when I speak, I'll sit down and my wife will get on to me. She'll say, "You left me a hostage." She ain't a hostage no more. Anyway, she won't leave, no matter what I try. Anyway, in this little story, there's a father and a son. And the father wants the son to have a bicycle. Not because it's Christmas or not because it's his birthday, just because all the other kids in the neighborhood got a bicycle and his kid ain't got a bike, so he gets the kid a bike. Right? And he gives the kid the bike, and he says, "Here, son, go ride it. Go pop wheelies, go jump ramps, go play with the other kids, go do whatever you want to do. Go have fun. It's your bike." And the kid says, "Thanks, Dad." And he jumps on the bike, and as he's leaving, his dad says, "Hey, man, when you get home, put the bike in the shed because it's supposed to rain tonight." And the kid says, "Yeah, right, old dude." And he said, "Whatever," and he's gone. And he goes and he pops wheelies and he jumps ramps and he plays with all the other kids in the neighborhood and he has a blast. And he gets home that evening, man, he throws the bike down under the tree and he goes inside and he plays video games, you know, and it rains. And a couple days later, the kid goes out there to ride his bike and the chain's rusted and the chain comes off. And he's too little, man. He don't know how to put the chain back on. But he tries because he's hard-headed, you know, and he tries to get the chain back on the bike, and he can't. And he tries and he tries and he tries, and he can't get it on. And finally, he sucks it up. And he goes in there and he asks his dad, "Hey, Dad, you reckon maybe you could, like, maybe help me, maybe put the chain back on my bike?" And the dad says, "Absolutely, son. No problem. I love you." And he goes out there and he puts a little oil on the chain and he puts the chain on the bike and it works like it's supposed to work. He don't get on the kid. He don't slap him. He don't knock him on his head. He don't punish him. He don't do none of it. He don't talk bad about him. He just says, "Absolutely. I love you, man. You're my kid. Go have fun. Go play. But listen, son, when you get home tonight, you might want to try to put that son gun in the shed now. I'm telling you, it's supposed to rain again." And the kid goes and the same thing repeats and he throws the bike down, it rains, and the next day he got, "Dad, could you?" And Dad says, "Absolutely. I love you. You're my kid. Why would I not put your chain on? I want you to have the bike. I want you to have fun, you know?" And the kid does it again, and the story repeats and repeats and repeats, and sooner or later, one day the kid learned to put his bike in the shed. And the next time he went to use it, he didn't have to ask Daddy to oil his chain. In that story, God's the Father, I'm the little boy, and that bike is my life. Every time I've ever asked God to help me put my chain back on, he said, "Absolutely. Because I love you, Jason. You're my kid. Put the bike in your shed, son." He ain't never told me no. I don't think he'll tell you no either. Thanks.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. to install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.